which is car thieves could soon lose their driver's license for life. Ooh, scary, says the Ontario Ford government. So this is this is a new law that's being proposed by Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, and it means that it's actually for 10 years, not even like for their entire life, but like I guess the title of the article says lose the driver's license for life, but then underneath it says anyone convicted of motor theft would automatically lose their license for 10 years. So I guess 10 years is considered a lifetime in Ontario for some reason. But whatever. In any case, yeah, if you're convicted of car theft, you could lose your license. This comes as a result of a huge rise in car thefts in Ontario, especially in big metropolitan areas like Toronto. And we talked about this we talked about car thefts in the past in a previous episode where the controversy back then was the Ontario government is totally like not able to keep up with the rise in car thefts. So the police is now like advocating for you to leave your car keys by your front door so that if somebody breaks into your house to try and steal your car keys to try and steal your car, you don't have to get into a confrontation with them. They could just take your car and leave without you having to, bother them. I think we've made our opinions pretty clear on that story. We can talk about that story if you want as well, but let's focus back to the topic at hand, which is this new law that's being proposed of if you're convicted of stealing a car, you could lose your license for 10 years. What do you think of this law? Do you think that it's going to stop car thefts, or do you think that this is just like, dumb, or this is not going to work? What are your thoughts?
Wait, so like if you steal a car in the first place, wouldn't that just mean you just go to jail? Like I don't know, so how are they gonna catch these people? So you get convicted, right? And then on top of that, you can't drive for 10 years, but you'll be in jail anyways. Like I don't know.
Okay, maybe... so here's the problem, right? Like I don't know like exactly what line in the criminal code is like used to punish car thieves, but I know that a lot of like car thieves are like here in Ontario, we don't really punish people that much. Like that's just a fact, right? If you look at just like, the rise in car thefts, it's like a lot of these people have criminal records, right? Which means that they've been caught by the police before for doing the exact same thing. And then they either get released after like a few months or they go on house arrest and then or probation, and then they violate their probation, and then they don't like get into even more trouble. They might go back to jail for like a few months and then they just get released again. This stuff happens like on a daily basis now pretty much, and the government's not really doing that much, or the police is not really doing that much. I don't exactly know what the problem is and what's preventing us from going after these thieves in like a really harsh way, but that's just the reality. It's like, yeah, like when they be in jail? I like theoretically, yes, but the reality is that they get caught and then they get released after like a few weeks. So yeah. Toss it to you, back to you, Dom. What do you think?
Well, with that being said, I guess this would entice people to not steal cars a little more, maybe. Like losing their license for 10 years would be harsh. Like you go to jail for like a few months and then you come out, oh crap, I can't drive. Maybe this might work, but it kind of shows like maybe we should do a total switch over of like the whole priority set of the provincial policing, I guess, or federal, I guess. It's kind of weird because I did get my a long time ago, I got my car like smashed into, like the window, and then I got my knapsack stolen. But then if you can't find the person who stole your knapsack, then like the police really can't do anything about your stolen possessions. So like that's unfortunate. Maybe that could change too as well. But yeah, I don't know.
Forget about forget about your stolen possession. They can't even find the car itself. Like most of the time, not even more than half the time.
Yeah, it's in like the middle of like Kenya or something. No, I've seen. Yeah, I don't know how it ends up on like across the ocean, but yeah, I've seen situations where like Ontario plates are in like Kenya. But yeah, this might work, but I think maybe it's just a self reflection of the policing system in Canada here, or provincially or federally. Like maybe there should be like an ultimate change, is what I'm saying. So maybe it might work this one. Anyway,
I do find it kind of I kind of see what Dom's saying with like, shouldn't they be in jail? That just seems like the logical conclusion. And especially if it's for 10 years, like if they go to jail, presumably that 10 years is ticking down, right? It's not 10 years after they get out of jail. So that seems like a little bit of a weird time frame. But either way, I do struggle to see how much of a difference this will make. Obviously, if you don't have your license, it's harder to get a car legally, but also if you are already willing to steal a vehicle, would you obtain the car legally? I mean, maybe you'd be more likely to, just purely because, if you steal a car, it's better to ship it out of the country so that the car is just gone than for you to steal the car and then drive the car around. So maybe it would incentivize some of them to tone it back because they don't want to lose their own ability to drive a vehicle. But kind of honestly, it seems to me that they're not exactly convicting a lot of these car thieves in the first place. So it just, if you're not convicting them, therefore you're not taking away their license. You're kind of not really doing much in the grand scheme of things on that front anyway. So it seems a little bit like a nothing burger. It doesn't, you open the burger, there's nothing inside, right? It doesn't seem like it's actually going to help the problem at all, really. At least that's kind of my perception. I don't know if you guys have any different thoughts.
No, I totally agree with what you just said. And like, okay, maybe this is just the Asian in me speaking, but like, a lot of laws, in my opinion, in Canada just doesn't make sense. So, for example, right back in high school, if you skip too many classes, your punishment is suspension. Like, can you guys explain to me how that makes sense? So, like, suspension, if you, in case people who don't, like, our audience members don't know what that is, basically you get banned from going to school. So your punishment for not going to school is you get banned from going to school. So this is kind of like the same idea as this like car theft law where like you lose your license or whatever. Like like what Tristan said, these people who are willing to steal a car are already willing to subvert the law enough to steal a car. Like they're not going to respect having a license or not having a license when they choose to drive that stolen car. Like, because they're already like willing to steal a car. So taking away their legal ability to drive a car, it doesn't really do anything, right? Okay, maybe it'll stop one or two people, but overall, I don't see it stopping. Like, I don't see it really making a difference. And I guess the way that they're pitching this is like, okay, we're either going to do nothing or we're going to do this law where we'll take away the license of car thieves. And it's like, if my choices are between doing nothing and taking away driver's license, I'm like, okay, I'm going to vote for taking away their driver's license, right? But like, this is like, if your house is on fire and you take like a Coke can of water and you like splash it on your house fire when your entire house is like engulfed in flames. It's like, yeah, I guess like it's better than doing nothing, right? Like this little bit of water on the house fire is going to put out like, a minuscule amount of fire, and it's better than just standing there and watching. But like in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to change any of the ultimate outcomes, and it's not going to make a difference, right? So this is like among many laws in Canada that I think just doesn't make sense. So the punishment doesn't fit the crime. That's number one. And number two is just we're just too lax on punishing people or enforcing laws in the first place. And this is even beyond car thefts, but like I think there's a lot of laws that just completely go, unpunished and stuff. And I don't want to get into a debate about like, specific laws and what, how many years a person should get in jail for doing a specific law, because I'm not a lawyer, but that's just kind of like the sense that I get in general, where it's just we're not hitting the right spots, right? We're too lax on enforcing laws, and for the laws that we do enforce, a lot of the times we're too lenient when it comes to the punishment. And by the way, even like in Canada, I'm not sure you guys know this, but a life sentence, right? So if you killed somebody and then you get a life sentence means 25 years. So that's what we call a life sentence here in Canada. So a life sentence is not a life sentence, because you could easily like live past 25 years if you're not like super old already, and then you can get out, right? So you're not in jail for life, and oftentimes you don't even serve like the full 25 years if you're like on good behavior and stuff while you're in jail. So yeah, I just think that we probably need a huge reformation of our entire criminal code in general, or the policing system. At least here in Ontario. I don't know how it is in other provinces. You guys live in Alberta. Do you guys think that the police in Alberta is more competent than the police in Ontario? Because the police in Ontario just doesn't seem very competent right now, in my opinion. But yeah, thoughts?
We don't have the car theft that you guys have. I'll say that. Like, and I'll say that at least some of that is probably just the fact that we don't have some readily available harbors to toss your car onto to haul it to Kenya or wherever it's going, right? Um, so I don't know. It does seem to be more of a Ontario thing than a Alberta thing. At least the car theft aspect.
Like a small thing I'll kind of mention too as well, slight tangent, but maybe it's related. I think policing might be a little more chill here. I feel like they have like less of a quota to meet, because like Tristan will probably see this all the time, like on the side of like roads, and these police cars will be in like very specific spots all the time, like consistently. Right, for example, there's one right next to the airport, like coming into the Deerfoot. There's like a police car and it says drive safely. It's like they don't want to ticket you. Like that's kind of like a provincial culture shock to me, because like back in Ontario, like me and like Nelson were in like the car one time, and then we like ran over a red light or a stop sign, and we got a ticket just for that, just because Ontario police need to get a quota for like getting tickets, but like they don't want to ticket you. Like it literally says drive safely. So I think it's maybe a bit more relaxed here. I don't know if Tristan can add to that too.
Yeah, they actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that some of those are just straight up cars with cameras in them. So there's not actually people in them. They're just taking a photo if you're speeding. So not all of them are, but some of them are. So I think that a big part of it is that they do camera for speeding specifically, where they'll ticket you based on a camera. And so I think that they get some funding from that. And I think that maybe that reduces the necessity to have their actual people running around ticketing speeders or whatever. And then they can maybe spend more time doing stuff that's more productive, like arresting people. But again, arresting people who are doing bad things. Sorry to clarify. I need to clarify that they're just so and I'm not super knowledgeable on that front. It's just maybe more of a vibes thing. And to be fair, there's also a lot less people in Alberta than there is in Ontario. So even if one in 1,000 people does something bad in Alberta, that's not that many people. In Ontario, that's a lot more people, even just within the city of Toronto alone. So I think that we are just able to avoid a lot more of that crime, and it's easier to manage for our police forces, particularly since we have both pretty. I think we have pretty substantial RCMP and like Calgary police, Edmonton police, whatever presences at a much larger capacity than maybe the Ontario police does, and so the funding is a little bit different on that front.
When I saw this news article on, I think Twitter was the place I saw it first. A lot of the comments down below are, let's just say partisan, right? And this it was actually, I think, also shared by Pierre Polyev. This news, and how, like, it, of course, coming from Pierre Polyev, who, if in case audience members don't know who he is, he's the leader of the opposition party, the Conservatives, and he's there's an election that's going to come eventually, right? Maybe not anytime soon, but it's widely believed that Pierre is probably going to be the next prime minister, given the where the polls are at, right? But he's taking this time in between when we get our next election to really hammer home his message that this is all Trudeau's fault. This is like something that this is like Trudeau's Canada. He calls it hashtag Trudeau's Canada. And if you look at the comments on the article where this was posted, a lot of it was people that are, let's just say, pro-conservative or pro-Pierre, that are anti-Trudeau, that are like using these like hashtags like Trudeau's Canada. This is what the result is of being lax on crime. So you guys know I'm not a big fan of Trudeau, obviously, right? I think I've made that point pretty clear throughout the past like 17 or so episodes that we've done this show. But I always strive to be fair and to try and be as nonpartisan as I can, right? Obviously, I don't always succeed at that. Everybody has bias. But, to be fair to even somebody like Trudeau, who I think is leading the country in a wrong direction, how much of this is his fault? So before I share my opinion, I want maybe to get you guys' thoughts on that. Do you think that Trudeau is contributing to this issue in the rise of car thefts and crime and stuff like this, like what Pierre is saying, or do you think that stuff is completely overblown and it's not really his fault and stuff like that?
I think like kind of like indirectly or directly in a way, like it's more of like a butterfly effect sort of thing. So I think my theory is because Trudeau's so lax with immigration, a lot of immigrants are coming into Canada, and because of that, housing is so expensive and people aren't able to get houses. And then like with the recent like rate hikes and everything, people have like less access to money, so people are more likely to do these crimes. And then because I maybe like PP's trying to like paint a picture here, but it's circumstantially just because of all these situations. People are doing more crimes, and yeah, unfortunately, people are like stealing cars, like things like this. And I guess Pierre's doubling down on that, but yeah, I guess he could be like indirectly involved to like what's happening today. So
Yeah, I think it's definitely not necessarily like a direct. I don't think Trudeau's going out there and being like, "Hey guys, do more crime." I think it's very much like just a factor of the way the country's been run. We There have been more people who are placed in the scenario where they are choosing to do crime because they don't have any good alternative to have an alternative income, right? And so I think that is a big factor. And, I don't think necessarily every person who does crime in general is like a bad person. I think that some of them are definitely forced into it due to necessity. So I think that the way that Trudeau has run the country has resulted in more people needing to do stuff out of necessity. So you could argue that he has some um, impact on it. Again, I don't know if it's necessarily super fair to just basically say that he is bipartisanly like he's just it's completely his fault. He's if Trudeau had done a better job of doing this, running the country, we wouldn't have this problem, right? I don't think that would necessarily be the case, but I definitely think that there is a partial correlation to how Trudeau has run the country and the policies that he's put in, and a increase in crime. And also, just one thing that's a little bit separate. I think that technically speaking, because of Toronto's and Ontario in general, the number of people that are there, the actual amount of crime in terms of like per capita is actually, I think, lower than a lot of other places in Canada, because there's just so many more people than in other places in Canada. I think even in regard to like Calgary and like Edmonton, etc., I think they actually have higher crime severity indexes than like even Toronto. But a big part of that is just the difference in total population. So, and if you look in a crime severity index, it's like there will be small towns where it's like one murder happened and the population is 100. So there's your crime severity index is super high, because one murder means that in 100 people means that for every 100,000 people, there's 1,000 murders, right? So it gets like it gets a little bit more generous with the larger the population is.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying with the like per capita thing and how like it could skew things, but I think what's more concerning is the trend, right? So I think what we talked about during that episode where we talked about the like leave your keys by the door like story, that story was like the context was that I think the amount, don't quote me on this because I don't remember the exact figure, but I think it was something like the amount of car thefts has gone up in Toronto by like 200% over the past like couple of years, right? So I think that's the part that is unacceptable. I understand with a bigger city, you're going to get more bad people as well, and you're going to get just like more crime in terms of the like nominal number, and it's going to make it seem like it's really bad because some of those crimes do turn out to be more severe, right? But it's just the trend is what's concerning me more so, right? So that's point number one. And point number two, my opinion on how much responsibility Trudeau bears. I agree with what you guys said, is that like he's not going out there and encouraging people to commit crime, but I think that he, as the leader of the country, he is indirectly responsible for like the bad parts as well, right? Like if the economy was doing well and if our GDP was growing like crazy, like he would take credit for that, right? Like you bet he would take credit for that, even though he's not the single-handedly the person that's responsible for like good times, right? So if he's going to take credit for that, then he should also take the blame somewhat for an increase in crime, which is exactly what we've seen. The trend has been going up for crime. So I think that we should hold our leaders responsible, not just for their actions, but for their inactions. And right now, what I'm seeing from the federal government, and not just Trudeau himself, but just the federal government as a whole and the police, quite frankly, is a whole lot of inaction, right? And I don't want to sound like I'm antagonizing the police. I have a lot of respect for that role, because it's a dangerous role, and it could, it's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, pretty much, right? Like, you think being a soldier in the Canadian Army is dangerous. Is actually way more dangerous to be a police officer, especially in places like Ontario, than it is to be in the Canadian Army, right? Because like with police, like we're not fighting a war right now, so the army doesn't like do that much. But with police, you're fighting these mini battles with like crimes and gangs and stuff like that day to day, right? So I have a ton of respect for our police, but the issue is that actually, I don't know what the issue is. Maybe they're underfunded or they just don't have enough recruits. I don't know what the issue is, but I think the federal government needs to come to the table and ask the police. It's like, hey, like, why do you suck? And if the reason that you suck is because we didn't give you more funding, then I think then they should get more funding, right? Like if that's the thing that'll solve the issue, I think that like if you ask the people whether they want like the police to get more funding, like I think we've gone through a weird phase where people were yelling to defund the police. I think that's all over, and now I see most people yelling to fund the police, right? If you ask the people whether we should defund the police or fund the police more, I think the vast majority of us actually agree that we should fund the police more because the rise in crime is really hurting, right? And if that means that we have to like pay a new tax instead of the carbon tax, why not it be like the police tax, right? I'd be happy to pay the police tax if it means that you can drastically reduce the crime rate, right? So I think that I think that the federal government needs to come to the table with the police and really discuss what is wrong and work with them to help with this rise in car thefts and all this other crime that's going on. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, just on the front of the defund the police kind of thing as well. I think that movement in Canada, I feel like is not really a good like it's kind of losing the plot a little bit because the Canadian police force is much different from the American one. And so I think that actually funding the police would be a more valuable for everyone involved strategy because funding in Canada does not, or funding shouldn't, but in general, but funding in Canada does not necessarily mean the police is going to go buy a bunch more guns, right? Like this is training funding. This is salaries to incentivize us hiring better people to be to incentivize better people to apply to be a police officer and become a police officer and be a better police officer because they're they have more incentive to choose that career path than something else, and like also they get better training, and are able to get more tools to handle the scenarios that they need to deal with. And I think that is something I've never really understood the whole argument of the defund the police in the, at least from the Canadian perspective, because like I'm sure our police force has issues, but again, the main argument I can see for defunding the police in the States is to reduce the militarization. It's Canada. We don't have the same level of militarization in our police force in general. So I think from what you were saying, like I think that we should actually consider funding them more so that we can get them trained, get more police officers, get them in a position where they can both handle the increase in crime and thus reduce it, as well as better able to de-escalate situations and be more well-rounded in dealing with different levels of crime. You don't need to again, and I think that's part of like how Canada is different from the States. Like we have a different opportunity for our police force to fill more of that role that's kind of not quite a social worker, but not quite a police officer fully,
You're
like
laughing
not
as
like
right off to the bathroom.
the run from Dom is really funny.
He really had to pee over there.
Yeah. It's like the little running in the background of the what's it called. But yeah, so I think that we have a pretty unique, not necessarily unique, but like we have a greater incentive for us to make our police better and not just try and defund them due to the Americas having an issue with their police.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think that this like car theft issue in Ontario, it's gotten to the point where it's so bad that it's actually an issue of national security. So I don't want to be that guy that like always like, wants to bring out the big hammer whenever there's an issue. But when it gets to a certain point, like we got to think about how much of an existential threat it is to the entire country. And if it is, then maybe we should think about mobilizing the army to deal with this if the police is not able to, right? Like I'm totally serious on that, by the way, right? I know that sounds like an extreme measure and it probably is, but honestly, like think about this, right? Like cars are expensive. If you spend $60,000 and you buy a car and it just gets stolen and it just like it disappears and it gets shipped off to like Africa and you'll never see it again. Like, and let's say you don't have theft insurance, then you're just out of like $60,000. Like how many hours do you have to work at an average job to get $60,000? And you got to factor in taxes as well, right? So it's if people can't be assured that their like property that's worth tens of thousands of dollars can't just like can just be stolen out of like their driveway and stuff like that, then that leads to a breakdown in order in society as a whole, right? Because like why would I go to work when I would have to work for like 2 years to save enough money to buy a car and then that car is gone in like a week because somebody stole it and the police is not able or not willing to help me track it down and to like actually punish the people who did it. And then if they catch the people, they just release them after a week and then they like the criminals go and they do it again, right? So it is an existential threat to the country, I think. And number one, before we think about like doing extreme measures, I think there's room for discussion with the police and the federal government, whether it be the RCMP. I know people are going to bring up, it's like, oh, there's different segments of the police. There's the OPP, who's the provincial, who's under provincial jurisdiction, and then there's municipal police, and then there's the RCMP. Like, look, I don't give a crap about any of that, right? Somebody needs to work it out. So if it's not just an Ontario issue, there's car thefts in other provinces too, right? So the federal government, I think, at this point needs to step in and be like, we're going to motivate the RCMP to help out with the OPP if it's a really big issue in Ontario, and maybe we should change our entire police structure if this system doesn't work, right? If there's multiple branches of the police that don't work together well and don't talk to each other, and something that's under like provincial jurisdiction is conflicting with a case that's under federal jurisdiction, why don't we just federalize everything, right? Like maybe that could be a plan too. I don't know. Like I'm just tossing out ideas, but like we can't just do nothing. That's my point. And doing this like license revoking thing, that's like very close to doing nothing. Like it's essentially doing nothing, in my opinion. Like I mean, I'll take this over actually doing nothing, but it's not much. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Dom, you were away for a long time. Just any thoughts from you?
From like what I heard, I went to the washroom, but I'm back now. I can hold it. Anyway, yeah, no, I think you have a good point. Maybe a bit more. I think from what I picked up from like what I did here, like maybe more in training, like with the police services, and yeah, like like provincial police or like RCMP, whatever it may be, we don't care. Like as long as like something gets done, like in the better, like yeah, then let's try to like make that work and make it more beneficial for the people of Canada. So yeah.